Welcome, everyone. And my name is Katie Deering, Assistant Director for Recruitment and Admissions in Graduate Online Programs within the Gies College of Business. I look forward to spending the next hour or so with you. Our time today is going to be spent providing you with an opportunity to understand how live lectures are delivered and also have a chance to interact with this high engagement component of Gies Online programs. Since many of you are new to Gies and what credentials are available, I did want to give you just a quick overview real quick before we get started today. We offer 3 online master's degree programs, the IMBA or Masters of Business Administration, the IMSA, a Master's of Science in Accountancy, and the IMSM, a Master of Science in Management, as well as 8 graduate certificates with more that are just soon to come. Gies Online graduate level programs are innovative, they're affordable, and they're also designed to be fully online to offer flexibility in access for full-time working professionals. Today, you will experience a live session from 2 of our talented faculty members and be able to just get a little glimpse into what kind of content is shared within Gies. Our courses balance a foundational material that's shared on the Coursera platform with an interactive high engagement component as well. The high engagement component includes a 90-minute live class each week and many other facets to learning like group projects, office hours, networking, and also being part of a great university like Illinois. Before we get started learning today about enabling operations and supply chains with artificial intelligence and related technologies, I did want to cover a few housekeeping items. I see some of you have your cameras turned on. Thank you so much. I do encourage you all to turn on your camera so that we can interact just like this was a real live weekly session. Please note that you are all muted in order to minimize background noise during this class. There may be moments though when our professors are going to invite you to participate today, and our technical team will unmute your microphone for you. If you have any questions, please use the raise hand feature and we will call on you. We're going to have one breakout session today, which will allow you to participate with your fellow session attendees. And then lastly, I want to invite you to feel comfortable participating in the chat. Feel free to interact with the professors and other attendees regarding the live class material. If you have program questions, save those for a direct email or a QR code that I will provide at the end to get in touch with our recruitment team. Okay, I am so excited to have 2 of our top leaders within Gies Business teaching us today. Gopesh Anand is a professor of business administration and William N. Scheffel Faculty Fellow at Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois. His research examines how firms manage the quality of their products through process control and improvement and incorporates elements of standardized work practices, transformational leadership, employee engagement, and outsourcing. Gopesh has an MBA and a PhD from the Ohio State University. And then since joining Gies in 2006, he has taught several courses in operations and supply chain management to a variety of learners ranging from undergraduates to executives. Ujjal Kumar Mukherjee is an associate professor of business administration at Gies College of Business and a health innovation professor at Carle, Illinois College of Medicine. His research interests are in the domain of healthcare delivery and healthcare management. He has worked with large healthcare providers to understand and contribute towards improvement of healthcare delivery processes, such as adoption of robotic surgical procedures, precision medicine, and delivery of primary care to chronic care patients. He also works on social healthcare delivery to underserved communities. He teaches supply chain management and supply chain analytics to business students and healthcare process and analytics to MD students at the medical school. Ujjal has an MBA from XLRI, India, an MS in statistics, and a PhD in operations management from University of Minnesota. So in this session, I hope you're excited. Professors Anand and Mukherjee will discuss the role of artificial intelligence, AI, in operations and supply chain management, or OSCM. While AI has the potential to automate several aspects of OSCM, AI is just one element in an ecosystem of supporting technologies such as Internet of Things, blockchains, and radio frequency frequency identification, and connected networks of sensors and communication tools. We're going to describe the place of these technologies in managing operations and supply chains, and then also use practical examples to demonstrate the implications, including challenges of their adoption in different contexts. So I know that was a lot of information. Let's get to the point. I'm very excited to turn this over to Professor Anand and Professor Mukherjee.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that wonderful introduction to us, as well as introduction to the topic. I think you made the topic sound very cool, so hopefully we'll be able to keep up to it. It's great to be here, so I want to thank Kate for the opportunity to do this as well, and thank you all for joining. I have, like Kate said, with me here, Professor Ujjal Mukherjee, and he and I will be switching places at some point in time in this session. So you will see him standing over here and me being seated and handling your chat questions. We have Kate and Tom helping us in Zoom space. So if you have questions, you can raise your hand and Tom can help us bring you in. And we've also got here behind the camera, Jackson helping us. He's the one that makes us look good, right? So that's the team that we have here. And this is how it is regularly, right? This is the same studio that both Ujjal and I teach our regular live sessions. We are in our 7th week right now of our IMBA class, our IMSM class. And Ujjal and I are partners in crime, not only in teaching, but also in research. So we work on research together. So it's great to be able to come to you as a team here, and we both work on similar topics in operations and supply chain management. All right, so that's enough of an introduction. Let me go ahead and get started with the agenda for today. We have a very short time. I was just joking with Kate that we're professors and we like to talk a lot, so we can just keep going. So hopefully we'll be able to get some things across in a succinct way. So today's session, what we are planning to do is talk about AI and other technologies, but we want to slowly get into it, right? So we want to talk about supply chains. Some of you may know what supply chains are, some of you may not. So we'll just do one quick slide on what is a supply chain and sort of get your headspace into that idea. And then talk about what are disruptions in supply chains, talk about that, and then roll that into talking about building resilience and the adoption of advanced technologies to take care of supply chain issues. So that's the way we have structured this session for today. And what, as Kate was mentioning, we're going to have something called a breakout session. And when we get to that, I'll give you a few details about the logistics of the breakout session. Some of you may have had experience with that. Some of you may not. So we'll just give you some details about the logistics. So when you do come back, how do we continue the session, right? And that's where we're also going to switch. So after the breakout session, I'll be handling chat and Ujjal will be handling the session from right here from this space. All right, so what are supply chains, right? A supply chain, the basic idea is it is the set of entities, right? It's a set of entities, firms, whatever you want to call it, that takes a product all the way from the raw material to the customer, right? So you can imagine any product that you want, right? Any product. Here we have a product which has to do with food. So you're seeing that there are grains all the way on the left side, and then something that you're buying from the grocery store all the way on the right side. And you're going to have different people, different entities, different companies, different firms that are adding value to that product, going all the way from raw material to you, right? So it's going to get transformed. Sometimes it's only going to get moved. Sometimes it's only going to get stored. There's going to be some forecast of demand based on which they're going to be stored in different places. And then ultimately you are going to pick it up off the shelf, right? That's what a basic supply chain is. And that's the picture to keep in mind as we are thinking about the idea of a supply chain, right? Let's talk about disruptions first, right? So the first area that we're going to talk about in the 3 areas that we said is going to be disruptions. So what are disruptions? What are supply chain disruptions? And for this, unfortunately, we don't have to go too far in the past to talk about supply chain disruptions, right? If nothing else, COVID, the pandemic, made this term supply chain really popular. It became part of the language here in the United States. It became part of the language even with the government, right? The government was talking about supply chains. It was a term that got thrown around quite a bit. And it had a lot of impact or huge impact on supply chains. So we just wanted to bring that out in terms of the impact that it had on shipping, for example. So if you think about shipping, right, what is the impact that it had? So the Los Angeles port, we had they had to get special permission to be able to stack more containers on top of each other, right? So that was the extent to which there was material that was getting stuck at the port, and it was just had reached there, and then they couldn't get it off because there were no truckers to take it off of the ships and bring them to different places. So we had a lot of material that was stuck at the Los Angeles port for a long period of time, with the result that they had to actually get permission for more of them to be stacked. We had farmers who were struggling because they had a lot of material, but they were not getting empty containers to be able to ship material off to places that they would normally ship to, right? So you had a situation where you had a lot of product, but no containers, and containers have a big impact on shipping. We had in China, there was a lot of material that was stuck there. So there was furniture that was stuck in a lot of manufacturers' warehouses, and they couldn't really get it over here. And basically what it was that the shipping container, which is kind of seen as the workhorse of globalization, right? If you go back, if you like reading about the history of logistics and so on and so forth, you can trace it back to the invention of the shipping container, right? The idea that a shipping container could take material in it, that brought the cost down and so on and so forth. But here it was that this workhorse was completely stuck. Another example, if we go a little bit further from the pandemic and going a little bit further, almost a decade further behind, right? So we're going to 2011, there was a tsunami in Japan. And you may have heard of this term called JIT, which is a term that we talk about in operations management quite a bit, right? Just-in-time manufacturing, just-in-time supply. And that got a bad name during both of these disruptions, right? During the tsunami incident, everybody started saying, or people started saying, companies started saying, this is why we shouldn't do just-in-time. We don't have buffer inventory. How are we going to handle things, right? And we can see that there was a huge impact, especially on Toyota. So Toyota is a company that was impacted in a big way, and you can just go through the different things that we have on this slide and see how it was impacted, especially because they are the ones that are the proponents of this idea of just in time. They also call it lean, right? So that's where this was being talked about a lot. This is an idea that also crossed over to the pandemic when we had, if you remember, all the shortages of toilet paper and chips, right? And that's where we were talking about, well, if we didn't have just in time, if we had buffer inventory, would we have been able to take care of these issues? And that can be a longer discussion, but that's an example of a disruption. Disruptions can also happen without having such a big incident, right? So if we think about disruptions, we're talking about disruptions in supply of product, and that can happen because of quality issues. That can happen because there were people working in the factories who did not adhere to the standard operating procedures, and then the FDA had to shut them down. The Food and Drug Administration had to shut them down. Disruptions can happen because of that. We hear about recalls all the time, and those can cause disruptions in the supply chain. So disruptions can not only come from these big incidents, but we see them all the time. There's a website called recalls.gov, and that's a website that Ujjal and I use a lot because we study product recalls because they're an indicator of bad quality. So you can go to that website and see the kind of things that get recalled, right? So you'll be surprised with some of the things that you see there. This final example that we have of disruptions is chips, right? This memory chips. And this is a great example of something that we call in supply chain management the bullwhip effect. So what was happening during the pandemic? There was a shortage of chips. And what is this news telling us? That there was a chip price slump. So this was a shortage, after which there was a huge glut of inventory of chips because now we had too many. Right. So first there was a shortage, and then you had the situation where people were over ordering. There were purchasing managers that were over ordering, thinking, if I order 100, I'm only going to get a 50. Let me order 200. That way I can make up whatever I need. And that's the mentality that they're having. And that's what caused there to be this bullwhip effect, which is that you have sometimes a shortage and then you have an excess of any kind of thing. All right, so that's enough background. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go into a breakout session, right? And this breakout session is going to be putting you in groups of about 5 or 6, depending on what it works out. So Kate's going to do that. It's going to help us with that. And the question that I'm going to give you, I'll talk about the question first, and then I'll talk a little bit about the logistics before we go to the breakout. So the questions that you have in order to talk about with the people in your team, and these are going to be people that you probably won't know. So don't spend too much time on introductions at this point, because you need to also answer these questions. So make sure that you focus on these. What are the questions? The first question that we have for you is, why have a globalized supply chain? Right? And some of these answers might be obvious to you, right? Why do we have a globalized supply chain? What is the need for outsourcing to offshore places, right? You can think of it that way. What is the advantage of doing that? What are the pros of doing that? So you can think of that as the first question. The second question is, you do have some advantages, but what are the disadvantages? What are the risks that you face because we have a globalized supply chain? What are some of the disadvantages of having that? What can get you in trouble because you have a globalized supply chain? Now, again, some of these may be obvious, but they're worth discussing with the people that you will have in your breakout rooms. Now, just about the logistics. So these are the 2 questions that we would like you to discuss. The logistics. When you do get together with the 5 or 6 people that you're going to be with, what we'd like you to do is make sure that you have somebody who's taking notes, right? Sometimes we give a Google Doc for you to take notes. We haven't done that this time, but so that's sometimes what we will do. Today, we would just like you to take notes, paper and pencil or whatever works. Make sure you assign one person to take those notes. And that's the person that can be the spokesperson when we come back and say, I'm talking on behalf of the group, but this is what we discussed. And when we do come back, again, the logistics of it is, you can raise your hand and volunteer. We'll call on you. It's going to be me in that chair that's going to be calling on you. But we want you to just give maybe 1 or 2 ideas, and then we want to give others a chance to talk about these 2 questions. So that's the way we will go about this. All right, so let's go to breakout at this point. Hopefully you all have a sense of what's going to happen. You're going to talk to the people in your session, and we will see you back in 6 minutes.
All breakout rooms have been opened. Please join your breakout rooms by clicking the breakout room button at the bottom of your Zoom client. If you have any issues in your breakout rooms, please let the Zoom host know. You can communicate with them in the breakout room or by exiting the breakout room and talking to us in the main room as well. Thank you very much and have a great breakout session.
Okay, so my name is Ujjal Mukherjee. As you can see, we have switched positions. There is Gopesh there. He will be responding to your chat questions. Feel free to ask him questions on the chat, and I'll be taking on from here. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll ask you to volunteer and briefly describe what you discussed in the breakout rooms, give examples, whatever you discussed there. So we'll start with the first question. What are the advantages of having globalized supply chain? You can talk about advantages as well as disadvantages, although we don't just advantages, right? Okay, so that's Johnson. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, yes, I'm Kwanzaa Johnson. In my breakout group, some of the advantages we discussed were the regional differences in skill sets and also the manufacturing resource skill sets. By sourcing globally, we also discussed competitive prices with more options and having better quality as well. We also considered an advantage in case of any type of global weather or any other global issues that affected trade, where you'd be able to have other sources for supply.
Good. So supply sources, right? Santosh, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? I couldn't unmute myself. Okay, so I'm from Group 8. Group 8, I'm going to repeat what one of the things mentioned by Stephanie for the advantages. Globalization allows us to have different types of flexibility resources, which we can't obtain naturally in one place, either because of cost issue, quality issue, or different availability. Versus for the risk perspective, the one thing that we added is it could impact the local economy, resources due to the competition, efficiency, and different factors.
That's perfect. Yeah. So next is
Stuart.
Hi, everybody. So we joined from group 14, similar to what others have said already, but there is also the resource availability and expertise in creating materials that you may not have in an onshore situation. And then to also add to the offshore, political context, climate change being an emerging issue now that organizations are having to deal with, and then product quality as well. So if you're shipping originally from the United States and then all of a sudden you're supplying from a new location, you may have a change in product quality and expectations with your customers.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. Product quality is a huge issue, particularly when you are moving over to a new location. You need to understand the product quality requirements for that new market, new customers. Yeah, that's a perfect point.
Jagrut.
Jagrut, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. So we had 5 people in our team: Tejashree, Naushad, Crystal, Jagrut, and myself and Dalton were traveling. So we, from an advantages perspective, one is we can outsource production to areas that are cost effective globally. We have a lot more options to manufacture things, and it can help with differing geographical abilities. For example, weathers. So we can take advantage of the strengths of each geographical area. In terms of disadvantages, one is the lack of control over all aspects of the process. It is hard to control quality from a variety of sources, and we'll have to reconcile differing local dimensions, example, taxes, pricing, culture. So we'll have the added complexity of that. That would be all.
And gotcha.
Thank you, Jagrut. Sumadur.
Hi, we talked about for the advantages, we talked about availability and accessibility that has already been said, cost efficiency, but also alternatives, like we have options. If something is not available from one place or there's a disruption, we can go to a different place. In terms of disadvantages, quality, political risk, and environmental risk has already been said. We also talked about increased lead time and market risk in terms of currency exchange, in terms of closing the pay cycle, and exploitation of resources for specific parts of the world.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. These are all perfect points.
Venkat.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, perfect. So for advantages, we talked about, as others mentioned, cost efficiency is our main point, competitive pricing, and we might get diverse supplier base, and also we can gain access to new markets. Plus, the technology advancements in other markets would be an addition. For the disadvantages, logistics is the biggest key factor, transportation, and timing of the products that needs to be delivered, and also political risk involved in it.
Political risk is a big risk. Yeah.
Thank you, Venkat. Rishi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rishi. I forgot what was my group number, but I have written down the answers. We're on risks, right? Or is it both?
Both, whatever you discussed.
Both. Okay. So for the first question, advantages, we discussed having more than one source of supply. That's an advantage. Lowered costs of labor, access to international goods, ability to find lowered costs. Those are all advantages. Higher quality products, or the ability to retrieve higher quality products, and delusion of power and control through separate enterprises. So there's a balance of power and control, not through one enterprise, but multiple enterprises. And then for risks, what we discussed was if in the supply chain, if one particular source has more percentage of the supply than usual, like if one had 50% of the supply, that would not be good because it would impact other parts of the supply chain. If the cost is only coming from one supplier, that would also be a risk. And the last one was, it's in relation to an example. There was a tsunami. I think there was a tsunami example used previously in the slide deck, but it's basically events like that. They impact optimization of the supply chain.
At this point, what I'm going to suggest, Ujjal, is that maybe we move on. So I apologize to the people who didn't get called. We have a very short time, and I want to make sure that we do get to some of the material that we would like to talk about. So Felipe, Sambhu, Anurag, Tommy, with apologies, if it's okay, we would like to move on to the next things. Thank you, Tommy.
Absolutely. And if there is anything very different from what we have already written, which you have discussed, you can say that. But I think we have fairly covered the advantages and disadvantages of globalization and a global supply chain, right? So while globalization and global supply chain started with the idea of cost arbitrage, many of the companies, automobile companies, other manufacturing companies, they started with cost efficiency and cost arbitrage, lower labor cost, higher availability of labor. But today, if you look at it, that arbitrage has moved a long way to quality arbitrage, know-how arbitrage, and a lot of other factors like market access, access to new materials. And these are all the things that you have covered in this, and this is very good discussion. In terms of the risks, of course, we have talked about all these risks. Now we can group these risks into something like an operational risk, where operational risk will be quality risk. For example, you are not able to replicate the same quality processes that you have in one country when you move to another country because of cultural differences, because of process differences, maybe the work ethics differences. So there's or the regulation differences, right? So that's more of a operational risk. Then you can also have strategic risk, for example, risk of opportunism by suppliers, risk of political disruption, all these things, right? Or this environmental disruption. And then you can have financial risk. For example, the currency rates at different regions fluctuate sometimes very arbitrarily, and you can have financial risk, right? So these are all the advantages, disadvantages of globalization. So having understood that, let us understand what UN has to say. So the UN basically says that these three, COVID, conflict, and climate, right? These three are the triple threats that's going to impact the world in the near future. And many of the factors, economic factors, including supply chains, are going to be impacted by these three. When they say COVID, it's not just COVID per se, but events similar to COVID, pandemics or some disease, health issues, right? There's a huge health issue globally, right? So if you can look at different parts of the world, there are health issues which impact productivity, which impact efficiency, right? So those are the things. Conflict is a big deal. Conflict and climate are kind of interrelated also to some extent, right? So climate changes does impact conflict in a big way, right? Because climate change impacts what is called the availability of resources, and availability of resources leads to conflict because of conflict over those resources, right? So these are some of the factors that we have to keep in mind when we think of a global supply chain, right? We have to account for these factors, right? So what's the solution, right? What's the solution? How do you really, given this background, how do you really structure a supply chain so that you can actually prevent that supply chain from being impacted by these issues in a big way, right? So this is one example. It says 64% of manufacturers say that reshoring is likely following pandemic, right? It's likely to follow the pandemic, which might happen, and it's happening in some sectors, like in the chip manufacturing sector and some other sectors, high-tech sectors. However, will that happen for all the sectors? We don't know that, right? There are more issues than just disruption. It's a question of balancing between risks and the rewards of certain things, right? So what are the trade-offs? And this is what we are going to discuss in the rest of this session, that how do you really build resilience in a supply chain, right? Given these risks, and some of the risks can be controlled for, some of the risks cannot be controlled for, but you have to acknowledge and protect the supply chain against those risks. And if some event like COVID were to happen, how do you build supply chains which are resilient to those events, right? So that's what we are going to understand in the rest of the session, right? So what is resilience? We'll start with the definition of resilience. So resilience is the ability to quickly respond or recover from a disruption, and be able to supply and meet the demand as fast as possible and as in short time as possible, right? So that's what we will understand by resilience, right? So on one hand, you can look at how can you prevent your supply chain from disruptions, right? So that is more about a risk management issue. How can you manage the risk? The flip side of that is resilience, that given that you cannot, the cost of preventing the supply chain from all sorts of disruption is too high, how can you really build your supply chain to be resilient when some disruption were to occur? If some disruption were to occur, how do you really come out of that? How do you really minimize the impact of that, right? So that's what we are going to understand. Right? So all these discussions that we had so far, we can summarize that probably in this slide. So how does the global supply chain, how has the global supply chain, the term and the concept of global supply chain moved on in the last 20 years, right? So in the early parts of 2000, when globalization really started, right, with a lot of manufacturing moving across the globe, a lot of labor and know-how moving across the globe, right? So what was the traditional perspective of supply chain? What's the emerging perspective of supply chain, right? So the traditional perspective was about cost and efficiency. How can you build efficiency and cost? But the emerging perspective is about balancing efficiency and the risk, right? And all these disruption events that we talked about in the recent times has led to this change, that how do you really balance between the efficiency, cost, and risk, right? So what the trade-off has moved from just cost arbitrage to cost arbitrage, efficiency arbitrage, but also how do you manage risk? How do you build a resilient to risk supply chain, right? Then quality and product features, right? Traditionally, we had been talking about quality and product features. How can you improve the product features and the performances? And we have moved a long way. I mean, obviously, these things are there. These things don't go away, right? We have moved a long way to mass customization. Can we use technology, data analytics, and other factors to personalize products, right? Personalize services. In healthcare industry, for example, we are personalizing care. In a lot of consumer product industry, we are personalizing the products, right? So how can you do that? How can you use technology to achieve personalization, right? Customer service meeting set standards. So from satisfying kind of a philosophy in customer service, we have moved to flexible customer service. How can you give the customers the flexibility to avail services and the type of services and the extent of services as and when they need, right? So flexibility, how can you build in flexibility in customer service? So 3D printing and a lot of other technologies does help in doing that, right? And from reducing uncertainties and disruptions, so that's the risk prevention philosophy, that how can you reduce the uncertainties in a supply chain, to how can you build resilience to potential disruptions, right? That's the shift that has occurred, and this is what we need to understand, right? So one thing that we do differently in a regular kind of a live session is that we study case studies. We have case studies, a couple of case studies, and we go into those case studies and discuss those case studies. That's something different for this session, because this is a special session. We haven't really given you case studies but in a regular session, we would have case studies for all these concepts, right? Okay. So what are the roots of supply chain risk, right? We'll quickly go over this. So vulnerability, understanding why your supply chain is vulnerable to certain risk, right? and uncertainty. So the combination of vulnerability and uncertainty. So uncertainty is kind of environmental. It can come from climate, it can come from political climate, it can come from many other factors, health-related issues, or even financial market and all these things, right? However, that's the uncertainty part. Vulnerability is a supply chain design issue, right? If you have designed your supply chain in a certain manner, then it may be more vulnerable to these uncertainties than other designs, right? So what are the sources of vulnerability? Unintegrated complexities. So what do we understand by complexity in a supply chain? Complexity, the term itself, means the combination of two factors. First is the number of parts and components in anything. So in a supply chain, the number of different parts of a supply chain, right? How if it has too many suppliers, too many locations, then it is a complex supply chain. But not only that, not just the numerosity of the parts and components, but the interdependence on that. If they are not well integrated, if they are loosely integrated, then that makes your supply chain vulnerable. The other thing is over-centralization of control, right? So again, you can go over these things. I won't go into all the points for sake of time. So one of the issues, how do you mitigate this? How do you really mitigate this? In a global supply chain, when your suppliers are located in different locations in far-flung countries, right? If you look at, so I give this typical example of chocolate, right? Cocoa, right? Chocolate. So if you look at the cocoa supplier and the sugar supplier, and if you look at the chocolate supply chain, our favorite chocolate bar supply chain, it's really all over the world, right? How do you integrate that supply chain? So one of the traditional ways of doing it is vertical integration. Can you integrate your supply chain by taking over your suppliers, financially investing in your suppliers? But that's too expensive and that's financially risky. So the concept has moved from there to virtual integration. Can you virtually integrate your supply chain through digitization of your supply chain? And that's where all these technologies come into play. AI, RFID, IoT, and a lot of other technologies, these VCM technologies, value chain management technologies, blockchains, and all these things. So when you talk of diamonds, for example, right? Diamonds are rare metals or minerals, right? The main concern is that, is it ethically sourced? Is the quality really good? Is it genuine, right? So blockchain technology in a way can help you achieve all those things, right? Again, uncertainty, how do you control for uncertainty? Data analytics helps you understand market trends better. AI can help you sense continuous changes in the market and the environment. And when you combine these two using these technologies, then you can build a supply chain where the vulnerability is reduced, the uncertainty can be managed, and if there is a disruption, you can have resilience towards those disruptions. And these are things that we usually understand through case studies, right? In this case, again, building resilience. So we have talked about it. It's just more description of what we had talked about in the previous slides, right? So again, these are different technologies that we have, right? So let's understand the different technologies, right? What are the different technologies and what do we do by those technologies? I will quickly go over some of the technologies and some of the advantages of those technologies, and then we have a nice video to share with you, and we will focus more on that video, right? Okay, so we look at both demand uncertainty and supply uncertainty. So in demand uncertainty, we have these different groups of uncertainties, and technology can actually mitigate both demand as well as supply uncertainties, right? So one of the technologies that is commonly used is RFID technology, where you have a tag, a transponder, and you have the antenna RFID reader, right? So there are different sectors which has used this technology, for example, apparel, automobile, healthcare industry, right? I work with hospitals, and it's commonly used for tracking mobile devices in hospitals, right? Okay, so what does it do? It can help you securely access control in a safety sensitive operational setting, right? It can help you trace and track devices and inventory in a setup, right? You can have RFID to track your inventory, track the shrinkage of your inventory, right? So it's mostly a tracing and tracking device. It gives you the signals coming from many different small parts and components across the organization, and then you can combine that to understand different trends, right? The other technology is IoT. So IoT is a central technology in Industry 4.0. So IoT helps different devices and parts and components of any process to communicate seamlessly with each other, right? Again, you can see that many different industries are using IoT in supply chains, right? Like manufacturing industry, healthcare industry. Healthcare uses IoT in a big way, and it's coming in a much bigger way because of wearable technologies and remote surveillance, telemedicine. I intensively work with healthcare organizations here, and in telemedicine, this is extensively used, right? Okay. Again, the functions are, it can help integrate the processes much better, right? It can collect signals from different parts and components, different parts of the process, and it can seamlessly transform information across different parts of the process. And then you can build intelligence on top of it. You can take those signals and do data analytics or some intelligence on top of it to understand vulnerabilities, to understand changes in the system parameters, changes in the processes in a seamless way, right? And then finally, AI. AI is kind of a catch-all process. It can take a multitude of different signals, multitude of different data, and multitude of different forms of data. Like we talk about ChatGPT, right? It uses large, so that's something which is very much discussed these days, right? We talk about this large language models, transformer models, right? Different types of transformer models. But that's not the only thing. You can do AI on numerical signals, right? Apart from text-based data, right? So you can combine different types of data like speech recognition, video recognition, and all these things to ensure that your processes are more seamless, right? So what are the factors? What are the different areas? These are some examples, right? So it's estimated that the size of the AI, and this I would say is a conservative estimate, is around $14.3 billion, and its growth rate is around 20.17 CAGR, right? And new technologies are coming in the AI domain. In healthcare, AI is being used in a big way. For example, in terms of pathological detection, right? So cancer detection, imaging interpretation, right? AI is being used in a big way. So fleet management, supply chain planning, warehouse management, virtual assistant, right? Inventory management. So these are several areas in which AI is used. Okay. As a part of the course, we do case studies on some of these aspects of AI, right? So this is another example of AI, right? So Aspen Technology, for example, has developed this AI suite, which can take in signals from different parts of a manufacturing process and can identify vulnerabilities or deviations or trends in the manufacturing process or different machines and different parts of the process beforehand, right? So machine learning is used in a big way. It can be used for forecasting the changes in consumer preference and market preferences, right? And again, AI is used for monitoring inventory, stock, predict demand and stock out, forecast, predict changes in customer behavior, predict changes in customer trends, trace products throughout their life cycle, and the list goes on. It's not just this four. These are just the examples. And so what we'll do is we will see a video. We'll watch a video, and this video will take us through some of these technologies and how they are used. Okay. So let's watch the video.
In this omni-channel world, it is critical to give customers what they want, when they want it, and where they want it. This is placing increasing pressure on retailers and consumer product companies to ensure that the promise they are making to the customer is satisfied by their supply chains. Today and in the future, companies will leverage innovative technologies, new delivery methods, and differentiating business practices to enable convenient, predictive, and cost-effective deliveries to their customers. Adriana is the quintessential urban millennial. She's out almost every weeknight with friends and spends every weekend at some trendy show or checking out some new local hotspot or getting into her latest hobby, hiking. She's constantly up to something new, and she has businesses asking themselves the same things her friends are. How on earth do I keep up with her? This weekend, she's headed out on another hiking trip, and last time was fun, but there was one little snafu. And considering she's leaving tonight, she needs a new rain jacket now. And that's where the magic starts to happen. As she starts her search, the store recognizes her profile and it recommends a rain jacket based on the local weather forecast for the mountains this weekend. At the same time, the back-end system recognizes the overall seasonal uptick in searches for rainwear and adjusts the demand forecast across the region. The system finds her jacket in a distribution center, but because she needs it today, it's searched for it in a local store. She selects in-store pickup, and the store lets her know it will be ready by 11. It looks like she could use a double today. A few hours later, and it looks like the coffee's finally kicked in. Adriana just remembered that she needs food and fuel. She definitely learned that lesson last time. So she's back online placing a last-minute order. Unfortunately, the local store is out of what she wants. But she has options. For a few extra dollars, she can hire a third party to bring the goods from another local store to her planned stop. For a generation that thrives on instant gratification, this is extremely gratifying. She's in and out in just a few minutes. In the background, artificial intelligence continues to assess the purchase data from across the region. No surprise here, it looks like Adriana's at the forefront of a new trend as more and more purchases are confirming the uptick in demand for rainwear. And with a single tap, we notify the manufacturer to add more goods into the supply chain. Adriana's getting ready for her next hiking trip, and this time she's actually planning ahead. She's getting smarter, and so is the AI. It recommends that she gets a refill on the fuel and food that she ordered last time. It also suggests a weekend-sized backpack that matches the style of her other gear, which she adds to her purchase on the spot. It even knows to move to a single fulfillment center that has everything all in one place. I told you it was smart. One of the risks of an impulse purchase is that the pack didn't fit quite right, and that's a price she doesn't want to pay again.
Oh my God, you need a new pack. It's ridiculous.
So she sets aside the new size online, and with a quick stop to the store on the way to the trailhead, she's all set. To Adriana, the process is clean, simple, and predictive, but there's so much more that goes on behind the scenes. The supply chain has matured beyond an enabler to a key business process that can make or break a business's revenue. We get the customer what they want, when they want it, and we do it in the most cost-effective way possible. What can I say? I like her style.
Okay, so as I was watching the video, I was also looking at the chat, right? So this video gives a nice summary of what different technologies are and how it is impacting day-to-day life. There are similar technologies which are impacting supply chain, right? So to kind of, yeah, now I am not able to move. Okay, yeah. Just a second, sorry about that. Okay, so the way I understand the role of technology, and we understand the role of technology in a supply chain or in a business in general, right? We look at the combination of business process, how business is done, the different actions, interactions in the business process, and technology as an enabler to that, right? So technology for the sake of technology does not give the benefits that are intended from the technology, right? It has to be well integrated with the business process, right? I'll give you one example from my personal experience. I studied the surgical robot, the robotic surgical procedures in detail in a large hospital system in Midwestern United States. And I spent several years studying that. Right. So when we first talked to the hospital and we asked, like, why did you get this technology, right? Traditionally, traditional laparoscopy and open surgeries were the way to go. And still many hospitals do only traditional laparoscopy. But this hospital invested millions of dollars in buying this robotic surgical technology, the Da Vinci technology. If you haven't seen a robotic surgical technology, just go on YouTube and type Da Vinci robots and you will know what I'm talking of, right? It's really a cutting edge technology with AI built in it, IoT built in it. It has all the machine learning that it can incorporate. It generates a lot of signals. It really enables the doctors, and there are advantages to that, right? It can reduce blood loss to a patient. It can reduce the time of surgery. It improves the outcomes of several surgeries, right? Not all surgeries, but several surgeries. So I studied particularly hysterectomies and prostatectomies, right? So when we first asked this question to this hospital, like, why did you invest in this technology? He said, yeah, because a lot of other hospitals are investing in this technology. Now, that's not a good reason to invest in a technology. It has to be really coming from a identification of a need in your business process and change the business process or adapt the business process to enable this technology to help you improve that business process. And that's where myself and there are a few other faculty members, we kind of worked with this hospital. We obviously wrote a few papers, as we do all the time, but we also helped this hospital understand when and where this technology can improve. So I look at it from IT system maturity or technological maturity in an organization and business process maturity. Those have to be aligned. If those are not aligned, then neither the business process works very well, nor the technology helps the business processes, right? So we can basically categorize different organizations and supply chains into basic and mature. So if you look at these four quadrants, right? So these are the four quadrants. Again, I will not go through each of these, right? So if we are basic in both the aspects, then obviously both have to be improved, right? But if a supply chain is basic in terms of its processes, the processes are not well integrated. The processes are not very mature, right? If we follow the SCORE model of a supply chain and try to map out the process maturity of a supply chain, right? Then if that is not mature, but we have a lot of mature technology in the supply chain, then technology is going to be underutilized and the process is not going to be benefited. So we have to really understand these two in a very cohesive and integral manner. We have, when we teach this in a regular course, we have case studies where we understand the theory and we understand application of that theory, and also we supplement that with quantitative analytics on inventory and other things, right? So that's where it is. So this is a summary of that case study. This is a summary of what we discuss in detail in a regular course, right? So supply chains can work as a coordinated whole only when both processes are mature and the IT system is mature, and we need to understand what are the elements of this process maturity. How do you achieve alignment within the supply chain? How do you achieve the integration of the different process elements, right? What are the different strategies of doing that? Similarly, how do you complement that with different technologies? RFID, for example, IoT, for example. And we can take the example of either manufacturing or healthcare or any other service industry or process industry, right? We can take the example of hospitals or anything that you can think of, right? And we can map these two and understand that how these process elements help the technology elements and vice versa, right? So the point of caution to conclude this session is that leveraging the promised benefits of technology requires significant process re-engineering and internal adaptation to integrate technology within the business process. And this is something which many organizations fail in doing. And that's where the key value comes from. Understanding the technology is just one part of it. Understanding the business processes is another part of it. But how do you really marry the two together in a cohesive manner is what is very important, right? So again, to conclude, this was an overview of what we do in a technology in supply chain kind of a class. What is different from a regular class is that we supplement this with case studies and we analyze cases in detail, right? And that gives obviously a more practical way of understanding, right? Okay, so that's all we have. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in the group discussion and listening to us, right? I will ask for some last minute comments if there are any, or if you have any views, please volunteer too.
Yes, we have
You
a
can
few.
raise your hand. Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say we have a few minutes if anybody has any questions for the professors. Everybody's shy today.
Either we confused you thoroughly or we kind of clarified everything. So, that's
Exactly.
the two possibilities. I hope it's the second one, not the first one.
So Anurag is asking, what is the class size? Anurag, so it's the live sessions are usually varied. So we have a choice of live sessions, and depending on your time zone and depending on your capability to take off from work, because most of the learners are professionals, you can attend different live sessions. So the number of learners is usually varied. We have attended live sessions where there were 150, there were 100, as low as sometimes 70. So I would say between 70 and 150. Kate, would that be accurate as far as across the program is concerned?
Yep. We usually anywhere from 65 to 200, depending on the course and which degree. So.
Yeah. Can you give an example of test? So the course usually has many components to testing. One is group assignment, where you work with your group on cases and write summary of cases, analyze cases. Then there are individual homeworks and assignments. Again, it can be on a case, it can be on specific topics, for example, inventory management or process analysis, right? Or quality control, or even supply chain analysis, supply chain quality. And then finally, we have what is called the exams, right? There are 2 exams, particularly in this course. It's not true for every course. And this is how our course is kind of structured. We have 2 exams. These are all multiple choice questions, right? It's a combination of both qualitative and quantitative questions. The quantitative element is not the core focus. The core focus is on understanding applications, but some amount of quantitative modeling is required to actually apply those in some cases. So we have cases where you can apply, for example, inventory models and process analysis techniques, and you can analyze those cases better by doing those than just being subjective about it. So that's what it is about. So it's kind of a well-rounded assessment, I would say, not just a test.
Anurag has a question. So Tom, if you could unmute Anurag, please.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks for this very informative session. Just a very pertinent question. Like, I have a lot of interest in registering for a graduate program. The real classes are simulated in an online environment. But in the real classes, like on-campus classes, you have a limited batch size. Like today itself, also we had a breakout session. I was just informed that we had a class of virtual class of around 100 participants. During the regular program, like if there are breakout sessions, will the professor and the student be able to interact? Because there will be, like today also, like many of the attendees could not speak. Will it not be good to have a limited batch size in the online classes also, to have some kind of an online interaction? Every group can participate. Otherwise, in a 150 class, I don't think in the regular 1-year program also that opportunity will come. The program is really nice. I am very interested here, but just a suggestion.
Yeah, I would say, Anurag, there are pros and cons, right? So that is the thing. So if we have to create smaller sessions, we have to fix the times. And then the learners have to be forced to come at those times. What we do, so like I said, there are pros and cons, there are advantages and disadvantages, and we have to give and take a little bit in order to make the program more accessible to different types of learners. What we do have is, in addition to the live sessions, we have, so for right now, Ujjal and I are doing 3 office hours per week. So in addition to the live sessions, there are office hours per week where it's not just your team, but individual questions, right? So if there are questions like, how do I apply this in my workplace? Or this is something that I don't agree with, I don't see this happening in my workplace. So those types of discussions, we have very rich discussions of those type in our office hours as well. So right now, for example, at 7:15, we have an office hour set up, and I'm going to rush across and go to my office and sit down for an hour office hour. And we do these at different times of the week. So pros and cons, we're trying to give flexibility for timing. And that's why we're not, so it's in a particular week, if you cannot make it at a particular time, you can go at a different time, or you can go to the office hour. And you can also watch the recording. And Kate can correct me if I misstated something, because she's more aware of the programmatic things.
No, I think that was a great recap. I think that is a common question. Sometimes people are like, in this virtual environment, how are we connecting and collaborating and networking? But that's why we designed it the way that we did, with the Coursera component, the live sessions, the faculty interaction. There's a lot, and you're going to feel like a part of the program and have a lot of connections and a lot of FaceTime, I guess, with your professors and your fellow students. So I can talk further about that. I know that you all have your office hours coming up, and I know we've had some great questions.
Well, let's take Felipe's question. I had to cut him off even earlier, so I want to make sure that I give him the chance. Felipe, go
all right,
ahead,
last question.
Yeah, I thought it was going to happen again, but hello and thank you. It just so happens that, as I think, Kate, you started answering the question before I got a chance to ask it, but since we were on the topic of collaborations, I wanted to understand how it would work for team assignments, if that's a thing that we handle over here. I noticed when we were on the breakout groups, that was sort of randomly assigned, and it had to be that way. But I would imagine for homeworks and assignments like that, we might want to be like teamed up related to different time zones where the students are located. So I just wanted to know how that would work.
Yeah, so I can take a shot at that, and then again, Kate can correct me if I'm misstating something. So what we do is we do assign teams, and the teams are we've started this new system in the last few quarters, where we are allowing learners to give their preferences. So they can say, I want to be in this time zone, and I want to be with these students from these time zones, and that's how we are able to cater to that. So there are, in answering Jessica's question also on chat, because it's related to Felipe's question, there are teams that are assigned. It's not just randomized. They are assigned based on where they're located. And those teams, we also take care that if you're taking multiple courses, that you are working with the same team. If you'd like to work with different teams, those are things that we do try to allow for as much as possible. So it's and then you work throughout the semester with that same team. So if you are working with them, I also understand from the learners that there are several informal groups that they form outside of what we are talking about here in order to talk about things. And the last thing I'll say is that we have a very active discussion board on Canvas. So we see a lot of discussion. So this would also go back to Anurag's question on interacting with the professors and asking different questions. The discussion board is very lively with questions ranging from how did you calculate this number for the safety stock, which can be like very, very practical, all the way to saying, well, here's an example where what we talked about in class applies in a different way, right? So all the way from the very specific to what we're talking about to all the way very strategic.
True.
Thank
the
you.
discussion
Thank you both.
keeps me more busy than the classes.
Correct. Yeah.
And the office hours. I enjoy the office hours. Yeah. And also the regular classes are 1.5 hours, so we have more time. Usually this is a material that I will usually cover in a 1.5 hour. I had to rush through some of the slides, which I won't do in a regular class.
Yeah, we like to condense it. We have a lot of people here who are new, so yes, these classes would be on average 90 minutes long, but for the sake of time and just to give you a little bit of a glimpse into what we're all about here at Geese, we kind of shorten those up to about the 60-minute mark. So we're a little bit over that. And so just to be mindful of everyone's time, I just wanted to say thank you to Professor Anand and Mukherjee. What a wonderful session on AI and its role in operations and supply chain management, and also your insight into some of these questions about how live classes work, what's a test like, things like that. So we really appreciate your insight. I hope everyone enjoyed this live class experience, which again would be pretty similar to what you would have within one of our courses. So thank you for chatting in the chat and asking some great questions today. If you're interested in learning more, you can scan this QR code that Thomas is going to put on the screen, and my team will reach out to you and answer any questions that you have, and also help you just kind of see which program or credential would help you reach your professional career goals. If you're interested, lastly, in applying to one of our credentials, July 6th is coming up quickly next week. That's our final deadline to apply for an August start in any of the 3 master's degree programs, as well as July 20th is going to be our deadline for starting in one of our graduate certificates this fall. So a lot of options there. You still have plenty of time to get that application filled out. But yeah, we'd love to meet you, and we're so excited that you took the first step to be here today. Again, thank you, professors, for taking the time. I know you guys are so busy. Obviously, you're going on to your faculty office hours now, so we really appreciate you helping everyone understand what we do here at Geese. So thanks again. I hope everyone has a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're located, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody. Thanks, Kate, for inviting us for this session. It's been very good. Thanks to all the students, potential students.
All right,
Have a
everyone,
nice
have a good day.